Bombshell news out of the world of fashion hit the headlines today. Former Abercrombie Fitch CEO Michael Jeffries and two others arrested. They're charged with sex trafficking and interstate prostitution. So Jeffries, seen here getting in the back of a police cruiser, faces a judge in about an hour in Florida. And CBS News correspondent Christian Benavides joins us live. He's in West Palm Beach today. Christian, these are some disturbing allegations. Quite a network here.
Reed, just absolutely horrible allegations. This is just so disturbing. The defendants in this case, Mike Jeffries, the former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch, Matthew Smith, his partner, and James Jacobson, who, according to federal prosecutors, was hired to sort of facilitate what they're calling sex trafficking, facilitate these sexual acts that would happen, according to officials. What federal prosecutors say is that they targeted young men who were looking for a career in modeling with promises of career advancement. And they would show up to what federal prosecutors are calling a casting couch operation. Essentially told that they were going there for an interview and turning into just this horrible, horrible situation. According to the indictment, Jacobson allegedly had the victims do a tryout with him before these alleged victims would go on to meet Jeffries and Smith. All of this after they were allegedly told to sign non-disclosure agreements, were given alcohol and drugs so that they could perform these sexual acts for the former CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch. Just absolutely very disturbing allegations here. According to officials, the crimes allegedly occurred, or at least the probe goes back to the late 2000s up until March of 2015. Mike Jeffries was the CEO of Abercrombie and Fitch from 1992 to 2014.
Much more and many more layers to this onion for sure. Christian Benavides reporting live there from South Florida. We appreciate you. So we're watching the results of a meeting that happened moments ago between U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant to talk about the hopes for a ceasefire in Gaza. We'll have more on that in a moment. But first, let's talk about this. Tensions high in Israel. In fact, our own CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio woke up to the sounds of air raid sirens as Israel intercepted flying Hezbollah missiles.
All this afternoon, rocket sirens have been sounding throughout northern Israel. And this morning, we actually woke up to air raid alerts here in Tel Aviv. Sirens went off at about 7:45 a.m. Then we heard the booms of Iron Dome missile interceptions from our shelters. And that was just a couple hours before Blinken landed. Israel's military says Hezbollah fired about 20 projectiles in total at northern and central Israel this morning. Now up in Lebanon, President Biden's special envoy is still there trying to work towards a peace between Israel and Hamas. Now, as for Secretary Blinken, this is his 11th time to Israel in 12 months to try to find a way to a ceasefire here. And that ceasefire continues to be the same word, elusive. The last time he was here was the last time that I was here back in August. And since then, we know Israel has opened up a second front of fighting with Lebanon in the north. Iran retaliated against Israel with about 200 missiles. We're expecting Israel to retaliate here. We have been on standby, and the heads of Hamas and Hezbollah, we know, are now dead. The situation is arguably more tense, and the balance of power appears to have shifted to Netanyahu's favor. Blinken is meeting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and other officials throughout today before traveling elsewhere in the region to continue this push for peace. Ramy Inocencio, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
So Ramy talked about those meetings, so let's drill down a little bit. 2-hour meeting between Blinken and Israeli officials. So let's bring in CBS News contributor Robert Berger. It looks like the U.S. wants to really meet this moment with the death of that top Hamas leader Sinwar to try to parlay that into hostage release and hopefully ceasefire negotiations. What's the likelihood that the death of that leader could actually lead to that?
You know, it doesn't really look good right now. I mean, one problem is that with Sinwar out of the way, Yahya Sinwar, the assassinated Hamas leader, who do you actually negotiate with on the Hamas side? Now, both Israel and the U.S. had considered him one of the main obstacles to a ceasefire. With him out of the way, there's hope maybe there would be a more moderate leadership. But to be honest, what we're hearing from senior Hamas officials is pretty much what we've heard for the past 7 months of stalled negotiations, which is that there won't be a ceasefire or a hostage deal until Israel agrees to a complete end to the war and to withdraw from Gaza. And the Israelis are also digging in. They say that won't happen until Hamas is defeated and destroyed. And that's something, if it's even possible, that's going to take some time.
And really, dual headlines out of this conflict, and it seems like every day we have dual headlines at a minimum. We're also expecting Israel to attack Iran any moment now in retaliation for Iran's strike in Israel. I'm wondering if that leaked memo that has made the headlines so many times over the last couple of days is really causing Israel to move around the day when that anticipated strike could happen.
You know, we can only speculate. The whole region has really been on edge since October 1st, when Iran fired 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. And back then, the Israelis were saying that it would be a matter of days. And then now it's already been 3 weeks. It's possible that that leak maybe postponed plans, but the whole region is on edge waiting for this Israeli attack, which is widely expected to take place before the U.S. elections. So it's likely to happen anytime soon. Everyone here on edge and waiting to see how Israel will retaliate for that attack.
Live in Jerusalem, CBS News contributor Robert Berger. Be safe. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
So, want to really drill down on that document leak. The FBI says they are now investigating and working closely with partners in the Department of Defense and deep sources in the intelligence community to figure out how it got leaked and why. The plan was allegedly leaked online from a Telegram channel named Middle East Spectator. Our live monitors now take us back to the United States and Philadelphia, where you might want to try to find ways to stay cool there. You see the light reflecting off the buildings there. It's hot in October.
It's well above average, too. I mean, by about 20 degrees in certain communities all the way up into the Northeast. It's worth noting that we've been seeing record-breaking numbers in the forecast today alone in areas like Philadelphia, stretching all the way over into New York and all the way over into Tulsa, too. I mean, this is a wide-stretched heat wave that continues to impact millions of people all throughout the Northeast and the Great Plains, too. Daytime highs today sitting in the upper 70s, lower 80s, anywhere from Chicago stretching right back over into Boston and down into Norfolk throughout this afternoon. Another thing to mention, too, they're going to continue to deal with dry conditions throughout the rest of this week while we still continue to track this storm that impacted thousands of people throughout communities in New Mexico and brought in snow for our friends over into the Rockies, too. That system you can see right here into the overnight hours last night, early morning hours this morning, still pushing just past Kansas as it makes its way over into Chicago later this afternoon. But let's take a look behind me real fast. I want to talk more about this heat because it's sticking around as we wrap up this week and head into this weekend's forecast. High pressure sitting directly over those states, stretching from Iowa all the way down into Florida, where daytime highs today are expected to be above average by about 15 to 20 degrees just up into the Northeast alone near Boston, Buffalo, New York, and all the way over into Cleveland. We see a similar trend up into the Dakotas and right back down into the South, too, where we continue to keep a very close eye on Florida and the recovery from both those hurricanes. Now, here's our temperature outlook for the next 6 to 10 days, showing above normal conditions stretched from Texas all the way up into the Dakotas, too, and past that back into the Northeast. So this warm setup that they're dealing with, sticking around. It's going to linger as we head into this weekend's forecast.
My goodness. Okay. Mother Nature always surprising us.
Keeping us warm.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much. So oftentimes we talk about U.S. leaders meeting with their allies in high-level meetings. Well, Russia wants to get in on that game, only meeting with different nations. Coming up, we're going to talk about a leaders' summit in Russia. What other nations joining Russia today when we come back? Welcome back. Russia today staged one of a meeting of many dozens of leaders in what it calls the BRICS summit. CBS News correspondent Ian Lee reports from London that this is a move to signal Russia is not alone and has allies.
The BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is presented as a counter to the Western-led world. In recent years, it's expanded to Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and UAE. 20 world leaders in total are descending on the Russian city of Kazan for the summit. It's seen by the Kremlin as sending the message that attempts by the West to isolate President Vladimir Putin over his invasion of Ukraine have failed. Moscow is touting this as the largest foreign policy event the country has ever hosted. The Russian president hopes to use the summit to convince members to adopt an alternative to the dollar for global payments. BRICS nations account for 45% of the global population and about 28% of the world economy. And there is interest in other countries in joining the group. Moscow claims about 30 want to join or seek closer ties. And on paper, it looks like the forming of a powerhouse. And on a bilateral basis, there could be the forging of closer ties. For instance, Russia and India have long held close relations, but the larger the BRICS becomes, the more it appears less like its namesake and more like a house built out of straw. First off, there are countries in the club that have major rivalries. China and India have had deadly border clashes in recent years, although they've tried to downplay those. But Beijing is also trying to push its influence into the Indian Ocean, which Delhi is concerned about. Then you have Egypt and Ethiopia. Tensions between those two countries have been growing over the use of water from the Nile River. Saudi Arabia is looking to potentially join, but it has had a violent rivalry with member Iran. Then there are countries that don't want to be antagonistic with the West, namely India, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. There are also a lot of economic and political hurdles that the club faces, so getting unison among the members, especially as it gets bigger, will likely be more difficult. Ian Lee, CBS News, London.
Well, you know who is watching that closely? It's the man stepping off the plane right there. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin landed in Rome early this morning, one day after he visited the capital of Ukraine. There he discussed Ukraine's weapons needs with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and how the U.S. can continue to support the country's military as Russia continues to fight Ukraine in those territory takeovers. Let's come home to the United States and jump the map now to Chicago. One of the sons of former cartel boss El Chapo started plea negotiations with federal prosecutors there. Ovidio Guzman Lopez faces narcotics trafficking charges. Prosecutors say Guzman Lopez and his brothers took over the famous Sinaloa cartel operations after their father's arrest in 2014. His hearing is set for January. Moving on the map now to the state of Texas and following up to that tragic story of a deadly helicopter crash into that now downed Houston radio tower. So we told you yesterday reports of lights out on that tower and some complaints about that. But today the owners of the tower say they were unaware of any issues with tower lights. SBA Communications says it acquired the tower in early September. They say it's a standard process for the FAA to ensure the notice during change of ownership. 4 people died in that private helicopter crash, including a child. New video to our monitors out of the state of Colorado captured back-to-back lightning flashes. This is out of the city of Aurora. This comes as thunderstorms move through the Denver area. Those storms also bringing heavy rain and hail. So, Jess, we've seen snow, we've seen heat, now we're seeing lightning. Mother Nature has a whole bunch of plans.
We have a continuous setup for us as we head into the coming days with that storm continuing to move off closer to Chicago throughout this afternoon. However, I want to start off with what's happening for us into the overnight hours tonight. Here's what's happening. The storm system continues to bring in thunderstorm activity throughout states like Illinois, all the way over into Michigan into the overnight hours. And that's the exact same storm system that brought in heavy downpour in record-breaking numbers with rain over into New Mexico just a few days ago. And to add to that, that's what brought in all this Colorado snow for us, anywhere from Copper Mountain with 11 inches of snow there. Breckenridge received 8 inches, and we'll continue to watch this storm closely as it continues to decay, like I said, over the states of Illinois, Indiana, and all the way up into Michigan into the overnight hours tonight. Now, we still do keep a very close eye on severe weather, especially from Wisconsin, southern Wisconsin, all the way over into Arkansas, too. This is going to bring in scattered thunderstorm activity widespread throughout those communities. Missouri, actually, as we head into the evening hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow. Now we're changing gears real fast, and this is also what I want to talk about. Tropical Storm Oscar, originally a Category 1 hurricane, as it made landfall into Cuba over the weekend, bringing hurricane-force winds and, of course, major storm surge and heavy downpour too. It's still decaying right now over the southeast Bahamas, just directly over that island chain as it continues to track north throughout the next couple days, no longer impacting those islands into the evening hours tonight, early morning hours tomorrow. But that has no impact on Florida as of now. The tropics have actually been relatively calm since we tracked really closely with Hurricane Milton impacting millions of people throughout the state of Florida. We'll continue to watch that closely, but for now, back to you.
All right, Jess, look at these photos to our monitors out of Australia. What a story. A hiker slipped, ended up upside down between two boulders, just wedged there. Matilda Campbell says she fell while reaching for her phone. The result? Diving face first into a 10-foot crevice in the rocks. Her friends could really only see the soles of her bare feet. In fact, you have to squint there at the monitor to actually see the feet there, but there they are. 4-inch gap in some places. Rescue teams worked for 7 hours to free Matilda. And by the way, because of their heroic efforts and their training and their equipment, Matilda walked away with only a few scratches and bruises. When we come back, we're going to be talking about strategy on the campaign trail. Former President Donald Trump appealing to Latino voters in Florida before jumping a plane and going to North Carolina to appeal to Christian voters. Also, Kamala Harris taking a day off the campaign trail, but she's got a full schedule. What she's doing before the cameras when we come back. As promised, when we see it, you see it. Let's go to our camera inside the U.S. State Department right now. And a lot of questions starting out a news conference about that leaked document detailing plans for Israel's attack against Iran.
I want to ask about the intel leak on potential Israeli response plans to Iran. Some Republicans yesterday and today are criticizing administration officials for saying they're deeply concerned, but otherwise not taking this seriously enough. What's your response to that? And yesterday you said this topic didn't come up in any of the secretary's bilats now that he's in the region and having bilats today. Is that still the case?
So I don't have anything to read out on the secretary's government-to-government engagements today beyond some of the readouts that we've already made public, and so I would refer you back to there. Look, as it relates to the issues surrounding the unauthorized disclosure, I think many of you have seen the statement from the FBI, who have indicated that they are investigating this. That they've announced that, and I will defer to them to speak to it. Certainly, we would take any unauthorized disclosure. It's something that we take very seriously, and it is, of course, incredibly concerning. There are appropriate entities of the U.S. government that are the appropriate authorities for these kinds of things, and we, of course, will defer to them when these things happen. Simon, go ahead.
Can we come to Lebanon?
Sure.
France is hosting a conference to try to make some progress on the issue. Does the U.S. sort of support the French initiative to hold this conference, and what are you hoping will be agreed there?
Well, look, we of course are always eager and to engage with partners on important issues, including what is currently happening in Lebanon. We will have representation at this conference. We'll hopefully be in a place to announce that in the next day or so, so stay tuned on that. But look, when it comes to the Middle East, France has been a vital partner in continuing to marshal support for, in the context of Gaza, of course, trying to get us to a ceasefire. And similarly, we know that they share our goal as it relates to Lebanon for creating the conditions that will allow civilians on both sides of the blue line to return to their homes. And we know that they also would like to see 1701 effectively implemented. I have no doubt that a lot of these things will be talked about, as well as ways in which participant countries in this conference can continue to support humanitarian efforts in Lebanon as well. I expect all of this to be discussed, but I don't want to get ahead of the conference.
You mentioned the U.S. participation, but it hasn't been announced as part of the Secretary's travel. So do you expect? I don't
have any announcements to offer as it relates to the Secretary's travel. The Secretary, we expect, will be in the Middle East region, as we've been talking about this whole week. But we will have participation at a senior level at the conference.
Okay, so if you don't send the Secretary, doesn't that sort of signal some lesser support for this initiative?
Not at all. We will have senior level representation, and I will say that this is something that the Secretary himself will continue to be personally engaged on. He's certainly talking about the issues surrounding Lebanon while he is on his travel. He is talking about it with important counterparts and interlocutors, and whatever our representation ends up looking like in Paris, we of course will be very latched up with the totality of the department. And again, I think we kind of get into this back and forth of whether just simply presence somewhere indicates any kind of prioritization, and that certainly is not the case. This is a priority for the Secretary. The Secretary is on travel in other parts of the world right now, but this is a vital issue to him, and we will make sure that there is senior level representation from the United States at it.
And if the other countries there, specifically France, would like to see a ceasefire, your position, as most recently, seems to be that you're not calling for an immediate ceasefire. So, is this administration out of line with European allies, particularly, but allies who would like to see this conflict come to an end?
Look, Simon, I will let European allies speak for themselves, but we know that there's a convergence between us and our European allies on what we all want to see, and what we all want to see ultimately is the effective implementation of 1701, but more importantly, the conditions created so that civilians can return to their homes on both sides of the blue line. And perhaps even broader than that, we want to see the country of Lebanon be able to stand on its own 2 feet out of the stranglehold from Hezbollah. I am not going to speculate on what proposals and ideas may come from the conference. I think that's the purpose of these kinds of engagements, to have these important conversations in multilateral settings, and we'll let that process move forward. Jenny, go ahead.
I want to ask about the Israeli strike near a hospital in southern Beirut. Does the U.S. have comment on this strike that killed more than a dozen people and left dozens more injured?
So I've seen that reporting, Jenny. I don't have any specifics that I can offer as it relates to that operation. We, of course, will let the IDF and the Israelis speak to the kinds of operations that they are conducting. But look, we have been as clear as we have been that when it comes to operations that the IDF is undertaking to degrade Hezbollah, which we, of course, support, that every possible measure needs to be taken to minimize impact on civilians, to minimize civilian casualties, and that one step beyond that, every possible measure needs to be taken so that civilian infrastructure, whether it be hospitals, schools, anything in that category, that impact on that needs to be minimized as well. We have asked the Israelis for additional information as it relates to this particular strike, but I don't have anything to offer as it relates to that. I think let's also not lose sight on the fact that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization that does have deep-rooted infrastructure in various corners of Lebanese society, and part of that has included Hezbollah co-locating itself with civilian infrastructure. Again, as it relates to this particular hospital, I don't have any insight that I can offer from up here, but this is something we'll continue to engage on directly with the Israelis.
So once again, more questions directed there at the State Department on what's going on in the Middle East. We'll continue watching that, and more information coming. Somebody who got a briefing on that very situation, President Joe Biden. Just a moment ago, our cameras were able to capture the commander-in-chief getting off of one aircraft and getting on another, going over to New Hampshire. This is at Joint Base Andrews. The President of the United States on his way to Concord, New Hampshire, where he is going to rally voters for Kamala Harris and have a lot to say on something that has been a narrative with the Harris campaign, and that is this: lowering the cost of prescription drugs. So once again, the president about to get on a plane and head over to New Hampshire, where Kamala Harris hopes that he can be yet another surrogate for her campaign to get voters to make that choice. Early voting in many states already underway, 14 days and counting until Election Day. When we come back, we will move on our maps to the western part of the United States, the city of San Francisco, and the murder trial that has riveted people in Silicon Valley. The murder of tech executive Bob Lee. Why the sister of the accused is taking the stand, what she has to say in defense of her brother, and will it be a slam dunk for the defense who say it was self-defense? We're back after the break. Welcome back. Let's move on the map now to California, San Francisco to be specific, in the trial against the man accused of stabbing to death tech executive Bob Lee. Some moments ago, the sister of the accused killer arrived in court to continue her testimony today. CBS News Bay Area's Lauren Toms reports why that testimony could be key to the defense team's work to free a man named Nima Momeni.
Kawsar Momeni taking the stand for her third day of testimony, her first day of cross-examination by the defense. In her testimony yesterday, she said she experienced an assault at the hands of a man who she described as a drug dealer, a man she said Bob Lee introduced her to just days before the stabbing. Now, earlier that day, Kawsar was with Bob Lee at the dealer's house. There, she said she consumed the drugs GHB and LSD. Bob left after about 45 minutes, and several hours later is when Kawsar said she experienced a sexual assault. That incident prompting her to be picked up by her brother, Nima. Nima riddled with questions not only for the dealer, but also for Bob Lee. An attorney for that dealer maintaining that Kawsar's relationship with him was consensual and voluntary, but legal experts saying that even just Bob's connection to the dealer could have been enough to trigger a motive. Now, when Kawsar takes the stand again today, we can expect her to be questioned by the defense about her relationship with her brother, a man who she has described as calm and always had her best interest in mind. We can also expect them to go into drug use not only from Kawsar, but also from Bob Lee. We know at the time of his death, through a toxicology report, that Bob Lee had cocaine and ketamine in his system. The defense's strategy has been to maintain that their client acted in self-defense. They've said that it was their client Nima who was forced to stand his ground when Bob Lee acted in a drug-fueled rage spurred by days of alleged drug use. This is all coming out as Kawsar takes a stand once again today, with members of both the Momeni and Lee families watching from the second row of this courthouse.
All right, so from California, we move on the map now to Delphi, Indiana. That's just outside of Lafayette, where the trial of the man accused of killing two teenagers continues. The latest testimony comes from the first deputy to arrive at the scene of those murders. Prosecutors showed the jury graphic images of the bodies of Abby Williams and Libby German, found in a dense wooded area. Prosecutors say 51-year-old Richard Allen is the killer. Allen, though, says to the judge and the jury he's not guilty. I want to get to this breaking news out of Florida. CBS News Miami, following a rescue at sea. They've got an update on a captain who needed a rescue and a rush to a trauma unit. Watch.
Chopper 4 over a rescue at sea. We have learned the captain of this vessel needed to be airlifted to the hospital. This happened just off the coast of Miami Beach. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Nasha Sherman. Let's get right out to CBS News Miami's Terry Hornstein. She is live outside Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami with the latest. Terry.
Yeah, Naja, I just did get off the phone with the Coast Guard moments ago. They tell me the captain was still breathing when they were rushed here to the hospital. But let's show you that video once again from that rescue at sea. Take a look at your screen here. This is video from Chopper 4. You can see the captain being put onto a backboard and then loaded up by Miami-Dade Fire Rescue after somehow falling on board this ship and collapsing. Air Rescue secured the captain and then pulled them up using that helicopter you can see in this video here. And you can also see in this video the rough surf as the captain was lifted from the boat. Now, according to the Coast Guard, the call came in just after 9 this morning. The Coast Guard and Miami-Dade Fire Rescue responded to the ship offshore off the coast of Miami. They tell me the captain was rushed here to where I am right now, to Ryder Trauma Center. The ship, the Atlantic Power, is registered out of New Orleans. Now, I did ask Miami-Dade Fire Rescue as well as the Coast Guard how that captain is doing right now. The condition of the captain, they tell me that is unclear at this time. Of course, as soon as we learn more about what led up to this fall and how that captain is doing, of course, we'll let you know. We're live for you this noon in Miami. Terry Hornstein, CBS News, Miami.
JMH, by the way, has a helicopter pad right on top of that trauma unit, so he got there fast. Let's go to our video monitors out of New Mexico, showing cleanup underway following some pretty devastating flash flooding. This happened over the weekend. New Mexico's governor declaring a state of emergency for some areas. You can see the infrastructure damage there. This is just property damage, though. There's a greater toll to report. Crews had to pull 300 people from the flooding, but 2 people did not make it out alive. Jess, it's why early warnings such as you provide and first responders provide are so crucial in saving lives.
It's devastating seeing what happened to New Mexico, specifically Roswell, where we continue to track really closely that system that went through, bringing in a century, actually breaking records when it comes to the rainfall total that we haven't seen in over a century just in that community alone. Now that same exact system is now continuing to track off into the east, closer to Chicago as we head into the afternoon hours today. This was overnight hours last night as it continued to sweep throughout states like Arkansas as well. Now I'm going to turn this off and I want to show you the other big weather story for us today, and it has to do with daytime highs well above average for this time of year. Daytime highs today, they're actually sitting about 15 to 25 degrees above average, and we continue to track that very closely as we head into the afternoon hours today, tomorrow, lasting into the rest of the week actually. So I'm going to turn this off real fast so I can show you right behind me. This area of high pressure that continues to build over all the east coast is sitting heavily just over the south too, bringing in well above average temperatures stretching from Tampa all the way up into Maine and all throughout the Northeast. Now record-breaking numbers are in the forecast for us today near New York, Philadelphia, stretching all the way over into Tulsa too. The reason why I bring this up is we haven't seen heat like this since the 60s, 70s, and 80s throughout most of this region. So these record-breaking conditions are definitely something to note. Now, taking a look at the next 6 to 10 days, we'll continue to watch above average temperatures stick around anywhere from Texas all the way up into the Northeast too. That mixed with, of course, all that heavy downpour that just happened into New Mexico. That's what's happening right now in the States. Two big weather stories that we need to keep a close eye on.
Okay, we're going to talk about rivers a little bit later. When we come back, our Eye on America reporters are talking about riverways in the United States, how to keep them clean and even swimmable. Stay with us. CBS News, Eye on America keeps us rooted in our core value. We mean this, telling your stories from your communities. You know, more and more of us are moving to big cities. In fact, get this, by 2050, nearly 90% of Americans are expected to live in metropolitan areas. So the shift means rethinking how urban spaces are used to support a higher quality of life. Jim Axelrod reports on the river renaissance underway in many cities.
For decades, the Willamette River that runs through Portland, Oregon, was a look but don't touch situation.
When we first moved here, there was no way in hell you'd get in the water.
A river contaminated by raw sewage, closed for swimming since 1924. But that was then. This is a very different now.
Do any of you, when you dive in, think, I'm not sure this is safe?
Willie Levinson, founder of the Human Access Project, helped make the Willamette into a vibrant recreational space.
Step number one, find a way to clean up the river. Step number two, there's the cultural change around getting people to see there's value in this river.
A $1.4 billion pipe project that kept sewage from spilling into the river took care of step one. Then came step two. The Big Float, an inner tube parade that brought thousands to the water and made the Willamette party central.
I talk to people who tell me, I feel differently about our city now. They feel more connected to the city.
This could be better.
Which is exactly what Nick Wesley is hoping to do in Chicago.
I think a lot of people see their waterways as a lot of unrealized potential.
Nick's nonprofit, Urban Rivers, is leading the charge to transform the Chicago River.
You just reached your arm in to the Chicago River and pulled out freshwater mussels?
Yeah.
And have it do for Chicago what the Willamette did for Portland.
When it comes to people swimming in the Chicago River, is it a question of if or when?
I think it's when. Within 10 years, it'll be viewed as something people do.
While this idea of an urban river renaissance certainly offers hope in cities like here in Chicago, and as we've already seen in Portland, there is still plenty of work to be done. Of the 3.5 million miles of rivers in the United States, 50% are still too polluted for fishing, boating, or swimming.
The most powerful thing is a community of people on a river that love that river.
Amy Sowers-Kober is with American Rivers, a group focused on protecting and restoring rivers, an effort that began with the 1972 Clean Water Act and now includes river renaissance projects in Los Angeles, Boston, Atlanta, and New York, among other cities.
The Clean Water Act is a great start. And now we need to ask ourselves, what do we need moving forward?
Chicago illustrates an answer, a culture change that supports the effort. Chicago had hoped to host its first swim in the Chicago River last month. When organizers hit roadblocks getting the proper permits fast enough, they moved it to Lake Michigan. But organizers, and Willie Levinson, who flew in from Portland, are determined to swim in the river next year.
Once the Chicago River becomes a part of the culture, Chicago has a hidden level of joy that it's going to discover.
High praise from a man who's already helped his own city discover theirs. For Eye on America, I'm Jim Axelrod in Portland, Oregon.
Well, let's take some live looks right now out of the East Coast, a view outside of JFK Airport in New York. You might want to head to another vacation destination because the Big Apple, Jess, is going to be a baked apple.
Well, when I'm thinking about other destinations, I'm thinking about Florida maybe, or anywhere along the East Coast. Yet we're all dealing with this record-breaking heat setup as we head into the rest of this week's forecast. By about 15 to 20 degrees above average right now in areas like Boston, New York, all the way over into Chicago. From Tulsa all the way over into New York and Philadelphia. Today we're breaking records that we haven't seen since the 60s and the 70s and the 80s too. And this heat wave is wide-stretched throughout all the East Coast, all the way down into the South. Interestingly enough, we're actually starting to catch a break the more west we go, closer to California right now, where they're more near average for the time being. Here's what's happening, though. This huge area of high pressure continues to impact millions of people throughout states like Florida, all the way up along that east coastline, too, with record-breaking numbers lasting into the rest of this week's forecast. Now, our departure from normal ranges anywhere from 10 to 20 degrees above average in states like Minnesota. Minneapolis is a good example, too. We stretch now down into Florida. Okay, about 3 degrees above average in Miami, but we are still above average for this time of year. And taking a look at the next 6 to 10 days, the Climate Prediction Center is showing above normal conditions from Texas, Louisiana, stretching all the way up into the Dakotas. So get used to this more summer-like pattern as we head into the rest of this week. Back to you, Reed.
All right, Jess, thank you. Gun safety advocates and volunteers campaigning for candidates who support gun policy reforms. CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand in Virginia with volunteers from the group Every Town for Gun Safety, backed by former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg.
Among the throngs of weekend canvassers hitting the doors in the sprint to Election Day,
I'll be there. Yeah.
are moms on a mission.
We're volunteers with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America.
To get candidates who back stricter gun laws elected.
They will fight for universal background checks. They'll fight for an assault weapons ban.
For volunteer David Manning, it's personal. His father died by suicide.
My father had been on a 72-hour hold after he had a mental breakdown and was still able to purchase a firearm that he should not have had.
Pediatrician Heidi Appel is still haunted by her encounter with a young patient who died in an accidental shooting on Thanksgiving.
There was nothing we could do, and that was the first time I had to tell a mother that her son was dead.
These volunteers are working to turn out the vote for Vice President Kamala Harris, while gun rights groups, including the NRA, are making the case for former President Donald Trump.
We view this as an election of turnout.
Jennifer Bremen says the NRA's push is in battleground states, including Pennsylvania, where gun rights advocates gathered this month in Lehigh County to get out the vote.
What is at stake is our Second Amendment freedoms, that ability for peaceable citizens to defend themselves and their families.
CBS News polling shows 6 in 10 voters consider gun policy a major factor in their choice for president.
Every time I put them on the bus, I just sort of panic every time, like, is this the last time I'm going to see them?
That's why mom Rachel Perrott will be weighing the issue when she votes. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Washington.
Well, Natalie also tells us the group is up and running with robust field offices this year in Philadelphia, Detroit, and then out west in Tempe, Arizona. What a story this is. Former Abercrombie Fitch CEO Mike Jeffries facing sex trafficking and interstate prostitution charges. Police arrested him, his partner Matt Smith, and a third man named Jim Jacobson. It's all part of an FBI investigation. A lawsuit filed last year accuses Jeffries of sexually exploiting and abusing young men, suggesting that they could be hired as his models. Well, Jeffries is expected to face a judge in Florida today. Now this.
Palestine is our demand! Palestine is our demand!
The sounds of pro-Palestinian protesters at the University of Minnesota. Police arrested them after the protesters stacked objects to occupy a building. A group called Students for a Democratic Society said they want the university to economically and academically divest from connections with Israel. The Board of Regents declined to do so back in August after weeks of demonstrations on that and many more campuses across the country. Sad update now. Navy bosses have identified the bodies of the two pilots who crashed near Mount Rainier. Lieutenant Commander Lindsay Evans and Lieutenant Serena Wildman were part of the electronic attack squadron known as the Zappers. They went down during an in-flight training mission. An aerial crew located their wreckage the day after the crash in a heavily wooded and remote area. You might remember this. Evans made history as part of the all-female pilot flyover at the 2023 Super Bowl. Social media giant Meta working to crack down on so-called celebrity bait scams. That's when images of and even videos of public figures get manipulated into potential fraud. So to fight the problem, Meta testing its facial recognition software. Here's how it works. Meta will enroll about 50,000 celebrities in the trial. Their photos will be compared with images used in suspected scams. Celebrities, by the way, can opt out if at any point they decide they don't want to participate. Let's ride our video monitors now to Philadelphia, where city leaders there unveiled something I just love. We need more of this. It's an art piece called The Portal. It's over at that famous Love Park in Philly. There's a tech angle to report here, so watch closely how it works. The portal in Philadelphia connects to other portal cities around the world through a live stream. So that means that if you're in Love Park in Philly, you can look into the portal and you can interact with, play rock, paper, scissors, even if you want to, with people from all over the world. Places like Lithuania, Poland, Dublin, just to name a few.
Today, I'm so thrilled to announce the arrival of a global symbol of unity, the Portal, here in Philadelphia's iconic Love Park. This is so much more than just art. It's a global conversation starter. It's a building bridges instead of walls, and with today's launch of the Portal, Philadelphia is not just the city of brotherly love. Philadelphia is the city of global love. As you can see, the Portal offers something truly special. What may seem like a simple camera is actually a gateway, a direct connection to cities, to peoples, to cultures across the world. And how fitting that this arrives as we prepare for America's 250th anniversary, as we reflect on the past, and the Portal offers a glimpse into the future and what's possible. You know, and yes, like the Liberty Bell, there is a small crack, but that glass is not going to stop us in Philadelphia from making history through this incredible, beautiful portal. And we really do invite you to be part of it.
So you might recognize the portal that first went up in New York City back in May. Well, New Zealand Airport just put a time limit on those long goodbye hugs in drop-off zones. What do you think about this? Travelers now have just 3 minutes to wrap it up with their loved ones and then move it along. So airport officials call it the cuddle cap. There you go. There's even some signs there. They hope it helps to reduce congestion.
We don't have hug police, not yet anyway. And if people overextend their hugging time, that's okay. But really the message here is just getting it front of mind for people to kind of help create space for others to drop off and also have their hugs.
So passengers who need a little extra time can move over to the parking lot where they can hug it out for 15 minutes or even more before a parking fee kicks in. So hug for 3 minutes right there on the sidewalk and then get out of there. Go to the parking lot if you want a 15-minute hug. Anything over that, it's going to cost you. That's it for us at CBS News 24/7. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back here, same time, same place. But in the meantime, our colleagues all over the map are gathering the stories that matter to you, news from your communities. Thanks for watching.